Meeting. It is May 18th, and we are convening at the Westin LAX, so I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we'll go ahead and start with a roll call. Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. I'll never get this. We'll start with Ms. Park down at the end.
Sunny Youngson Park,
Larry Kaplan.
Sochi Leon,
Carrie Ann Farrell-Hines.
Alicia Burhow.
Michael Savoy.
Mark Silverman.
Deirdre Robinson.
George Familette.
Kathleen Wright.
Jose Campos.
Okay. All right, we are going to go ahead and break for lunch since we ran a little bit over on committees. So we will go ahead and take a lunch break, and we will come back at 1 p.m. Good afternoon. We are going to reconvene the California Board of Accountancy on May 18th here at the Westin LAX. Everyone, welcome back. Just really quick on our opening comments. The CBA's mission is to protect consumers by ensuring only qualified licensees practice public accountancy in accordance with established professional standards. This mission is derived from the statutory requirement that protection of the public shall be the highest priority for the California Board of Accountancy in exercising its licensing, regulatory, and disciplinary functions. Whenever the protection of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. So, and then just kind of before we move into item 1, we just want to do a reminder. We have 3 hearings tomorrow morning, and we need a quorum of 8 people. So everyone who is RSVP'd for the meeting tomorrow, if there's any changes, we need to know right away because, again, we have to have a quorum of 8. Otherwise, we cannot have these hearings. And we've already called the judge. So if there's any disruptions in your schedule, please let Patty know as soon as possible. Okay. So we'll go ahead and move into item 1A, discussion regarding the possible change in scheduling and arrangements for the California Board of Accountancy meetings. So the purpose of this agenda item is to provide us an opportunity to discuss a possible change in the schedule for future CBA meetings. So presently, the CBA meets on Thursday and Friday with the Mobility Stakeholder Group and Advisory Committee meetings starting at 9 a.m. on a Thursday, and the CBA meeting immediately following. CBA business typically concludes by midday on Friday. So with CBA input and leadership guidance, staff have implemented several efficiencies while developing the various agenda items. And as a result, the CBA is able to conduct a significant amount of business in a shorter time frame. So as a result of that, the CBA may wish to consider starting the committee meetings midday on Thursday and convene the CBA meeting immediately after. The CBA would reconvene on Friday to conduct any petition hearings, conclude CBA business, and end the meeting with a closed session discussion. So in the event that there are meetings where the existing format should be used, staff will work with CBA leadership and provide significant advance notice to members. So I want to kind of open up the dialogue and turn this over to members to see if they have any questions or comments about a possible meeting change.
Why?
Yeah. Would you like to go ahead and take that?
Presently, the default is we just always schedule that Thursday meeting to start at 9. And what we've noticed is with planning our meeting topics, we often have the ability to end the second day a little earlier, and we tend to explore ways to make the meeting go a little longer to fill that vacant time. And so I think there are topics that sometimes we bring to the meeting that we could handle perhaps via an EO report, or we could combo those into single items at one meeting and lessen the amount of time that we're discussing the items at the meeting. So the reason for the suggestion is that it would eliminate members having to travel on Wednesday and stay the night, which would reduce cost, and then possibly for the convenience of the members and recognizing the importance of your time, that it would allow you that flexibility on Thursday. If there was business that needed to occur, members would have that freedom to do that. We might just go a little bit later on Thursday to accommodate it, Thursday evening, so rather than maybe end at 4 or 4:30, we could look at ending 5 or a little later, and so that could accommodate some additional items if they come up.
Yeah, so I guess that was a very short question, I'm sorry. Is the idea that we would go longer on that second day and possibly not be ending until mid-afternoon or something like that? I mean, and if that's the case, I'd probably be opposed to doing that. I'd rather get a full day in on that Thursday and go forward. But then the secondary question was more, what does it mean to staff travel time and cost? Does it facilitate anything for staff or make things any easier or more economical?
Was really the focus was more on members and really member time. And so primarily it was member time. We might add an additional 30 minutes on Thursday, maybe a little bit longer on Friday. I wouldn't see us doing late into the afternoon if we had sufficient items for the agenda that was going to occur. That's when we would work with the president to go back to the standard format for that meeting at 9. Really, it would be, the idea is our default would be an afternoon start time on Thursday unless we needed to adjust and move it to a 9 o'clock start time on Thursday. For staff, it really wouldn't have an impact. That wasn't really the focus.
Ms. Wright?
Thank you. In what I do for a living, I travel a good deal. And over the course of the years that I have been required to travel, most of the travel being to Southern California, I've started keeping records of the on-time arrival of the flights that I take to get to LAX, Orange County, and San Diego. I have found that on or around 72% of the time that I am traveling any one of the airlines, Southwest, United, and out of either airport, Oakland or SFO, that the flights are delayed. As an example, yesterday, out of Oakland, the weather was fine. Down here, the weather was fine. We were 30 minutes delayed leaving the gate and 30 minutes sitting on the tarmac waiting to get an entry into LAX, an hour delay. If I have to come down here the morning of the meeting, I would not do it. I made a decision a long time ago that whenever I have to speak or be somewhere or whatever, I'm not going to try to incorporate air travel on the same day because I cannot control air travel. Mm-hmm. And that being the case, I personally would come down the night before if the meeting starts at noon or 1 or whatever on Thursday, and I assume that would mean that I would not be reimbursed and I would pay that myself. Which is, that's okay. It's just, for those of us that have to travel, if we keep meeting down here all the time, for those of us that have to travel, it's going to be risky because we might not make it.
Please. Members would still have the option if you're traveling from Sacramento to Southern California, and if the concern was arriving at sufficient time to attend the meeting you wanted to come the night before, the state would still reimburse for those situations. So
okay. Then the only other thought I had, thinking that cost might be the primary driving force behind the recommendation, and I don't know all the details that go into this, so if I'm way off base, that's fine. Have we considered quarterly meetings rather than every other month and meet a full 2 days but meet quarterly? Would that save, if expense is the issue, would that be a better cost reduction than the abbreviated session on Thursday?
We have discussed quarterly meetings. We've also discussed a one-day meeting, and believe me, when we were first talking about this, I thought the one-day meeting would be great, especially to accommodate Mr. Campos. So, because his schedule is always on my mind when we do these meetings, in terms of efficiency. So I don't know if we need to, in terms of a quarterly meeting though, I don't know, yeah, there is a lot of business, I agree. And so I don't know if we'd have to change the rules around with DCA in order to do that, or that type of thing.
The board would have the flexibility to change it as long as we hold 3 meetings a year, mm-hmm. 1 northern, 1 southern. That really is the only requirement. And so this was just one option for member consideration, but if there are other adjustments or considerations members want to give to the meeting schedule, this was really just that opportunity to explore those. Mr. Kaplan?
Yeah, I like the idea of making the change because having to travel and stay overnight the night before, for me, is a hardship. I'd much rather travel. the same day, and the problem has always been, yeah, there's a 6 o'clock flight out of Burbank, but in the wintertime, you know, if the weather's an issue, forget it. You're not gonna make a 9 o'clock start. So you always end up the night before. And the funny thing is on Fridays usually, same thing with Burbank, you know, there's only like 2 or 3 flights. So if you don't make the 1 o'clock flight from wherever to Burbank, you're sitting at the airport till 4 or 5 anyhow. So I actually kind of like the idea of the change.
Yeah, and as well, I would love to do a 1 day. You know, the issue is that, and this is also, I would have to say, Mr. Franzella's efficiency. We have more and more disciplinary cases we have to be looking at, case in point today and tomorrow. So, and we want to be able to give efficient time to go over any questions that these cases bring up.
Maybe one option is try it once and see what people think.
You could do something like that. All right. So if that's the case, I don't know if we still need to make a motion to that. Or do you want to, or could we just, I don't know.
You wouldn't need a motion. The
Wouldn't
board
need a
could
motion.
just give direction if there's consensus, or if there's not, you want a motion to sway it one way or the other, you certainly could.
Okay, well, I mean, I like the idea of what Mr. Campbell said, and see if we can go ahead and schedule an upcoming meeting with the new schedule, and see if that's something we want to attempt. If we don't need a motion for that, then we can try and see if we can do the July meeting in that respect.
Since you're gathering views, I mean, so I don't like the idea of moving or changing. We can try whatever we want to try, right? And I think you aptly pointed out, trying to plan on squeezing to a 1 day I don't think it's viable given the level of business. If we end up at 1 day because of the nature of the materials and what we do advanced reads, awesome. But to plan on that, I think is tough. And so I'd rather, you know, keep focusing on the full day concept and, you know, keep what we're doing and utilize Friday as best we need to.
Okay. Any other comments from the board?
Isn't July usually a 1-day meeting anyway?
We don't expect it to be this time.
We took action, the board took
Yeah.
action several meetings ago to change it to the default as a 2-day, and then we change it to a 1-day if need be. Though I would suspect July will be a 2-day because that will be the first meeting in Sacramento.
Ms. Leon?
I would agree with Mr. Campos. We're flying most of the time. So I thrive out of maximizing my Thursday and having flexibility to be home with my family
Right.
at a decent time. So I'm open to testing and learning and getting better. That's just my own personal opinion, given the arrangements that we have and where we
Right.
live.
And we looked at that as well. When we were first discussing this, I definitely didn't want to move to the meeting to just a Friday, because if we do get done early, we want to be able to have people be able to go home and catch their flights and get home on time on a Friday afternoon, as opposed to trying to squeeze everything in onto a Friday, an all-day Friday thing. So, all right. So at this point, do you want to just go ahead and we can, if I get a consensus from the board, so we want to just go ahead and continue as business as usual, and continue with the 2-day?
Yeah, I make a motion to let's leave things as they are.
Second.
I third.
Thank you, Mr. Campos. Are there any other questions or comments from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? Okay, with that, we'll call for the vote. All right.
Thanks, Michael.
No, wait, these are, what do we, now, how is this phrased?
We're voting on keeping everything the same.
Okay, very good.
All right. Sorry, yes.
Alicia Virgo,
Yes.
Jose Campos,
Yes.
George Familet,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines, Larry Kaplan,
No.
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
Sunny Young Sun Park,
Yes?
Deirdre Robinson,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
No.
Michael Savoy,
Yes.
Mark Silverman,
Yes.
and Kathleen Wright.
Yes.
All right. Motion passes. All right, well, thank you for your input, Mr. Campos. I really appreciate it.
Well, you had my schedule in mind.
I
so
did.
just-
I always think about your schedule, so it's very important to me. All right, moving on to item B. We are going to have discussion and planning activities for the September 2017 California Board of Accountancy meeting to be held at Cal State University Fullerton. Mr. Bone.
Good afternoon, Madam President and board members. The purpose of this item is to seek the input from the members regarding potential outreach activities at the CBA's September 2017 board meeting, which will be held in Orange County on the campus of California State University, Fullerton. At the May 2016 CBA meeting, the board discussed options to schedule a future CBA meeting at a Northern California college campus. Unfortunately, due to various cost and contracting challenges, staff were unable to do so. Fortunately, with the assistance of President Burhow, staff have made arrangements to hold our September 2017 meeting at the campus of CSU Fullerton. To make the most of this opportunity from an outreach standpoint, staff suggests that we add certain items to that meeting's agenda and sponsor other related activities. Those suggestions are provided on the second half of page 2 of the agenda item in your binders. And some of those items include a CBA member presentations to students and faculty regarding the role of the Board of Accountancy and the CPA profession, a seminar for students regarding licensure requirements and transcript reviews, and an evening reception with CBA members and staff, students, faculty, and other stakeholders. Madam President and members, this meeting offers the CBA a rare opportunity to build and nurture relationships with this university, current and future licensees, and other stakeholders. Staff look forward to any board member comments or suggestions that may help to make this meeting a successful outreach event. This concludes my remarks, Madam President. I'll turn it back to you and the board for comments.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board or any suggestions about what else we could do while we utilize our time at Cal State Fullerton? Ms. Hines?
There's not a recommendation or specific explanation of the Board of Accountancy and the committees that, operate with the board. So that might be something else to explain to the students, that there are opportunities for them to get involved in serving the Board of Accountancy, either by looking to serve on a committee or seeking to be appointed to the board at some point in time during their career, and talking about what the board does as a public service agency, so.
Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions from the board?
I'm excited to be there. This is the first time, I guess, in my 3 years that we're going to be at a college campus, so I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'm happy to accommodate you. Ms. Shields?
So I have been at board meetings at universities and colleges before, and the students are very interested in human interest stories, so they like the petition hearings.
Do they really?
They really enjoy that. Those are really well attended typically.
Really?
So if there's an opportunity, because you inform them about standards, you also show them what you do as a board at the same time. And that has been my experience, that they like the interactive stuff the most. So anything that involves audience participation or there's actual dialogue with members of the public, that is usually what draws a lot of interest from the student population.
I could see that with ethics too. It would be a good teaching moment.
Right.
So, teachable opportunity. Okay. Oh, Ms. Wright?
One other comment. I formerly taught at Cal State Fullerton. It is a great school with a very large accounting department, and one aspect that I was left with as a memory, so to speak, of my years at Fullerton is the student population is very interested in getting involved in a hands-on basis with respect to their future profession, meaning volunteer activities like financial literacy programs and things like that, which would be more accounting-oriented. I know that with VITA, which I started down there, and we started with 35 volunteers doing 100 returns. When I left, we had over 100 volunteers, and we're doing over 700 returns. So the participation aspect, or the enthusiasm for the profession, is there. And we just have to figure out how to tell them, how we can tell them to tap into the profession, perhaps on a volunteer basis, before they graduate, to get hands-on experience. VITA is one thing, and they've got it, so they've got it already. But the only thing I can think is financial literacy, but I'm not in the accounting. I mean, I do tax, I don't do accounting that much anymore. So.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Oh, yes.
I,
Ms. Salazar.
Katrina Salazar. I would just comment that I really support this. I think it's a great opportunity, and there were some recommendations in here, suggestions. I would just share that I think the idea of getting our board members to do some of the related activities outside of the structure of our sort of prescribed meeting, which is an agenda, and we have our time constraints. So I would really support exploring ways to have related activities for the students that maybe can't make it to our meeting.
Right.
And also that fall outside of the scope of our day-to-day business.
Yeah, and I think I discussed that with you, Ms. Bowers, about being, if, you know, with me being in Orange County, and we have obviously Ms. Park in Orange County, and if folks are interested in coming down a little early and maybe interacting with the students, if you're right, if they can't make the meeting, so they kind of see what the Board of Accountancy is a little bit about. Appreciate that. Any other comments or questions? Any comments from the public? You have everything? You have all of our suggestions written down, ready to go?
Yes, ma'am.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, item C, discussion regarding the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, April 20th, 2017, proposed statement on auditing standards, forming an opinion, and reporting on financial statements of employee benefit plans subject to the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. Ms. Pierce.
Thank you. So the purpose of this agenda item is to provide the board with an opportunity to review the AICPA proposed statement on auditing standards, which was just referenced by President Burhow. Although initially we were only able to provide a website link for members to review the exposure draft, we did subsequently obtain the necessary permission to reproduce the exposure draft, so hopefully everybody had received a copy of it. It was sent out on May 11th. The AICPA is seeking feedback regarding 9 issues that are identified in the exposure draft on the content of the proposed statement on auditing standards. They're seeking specific feedback, making reference to specific paragraphs, including the reasons for the comments and providing suggestions for proposed changes. If the CBA wishes to respond, it may want to consider designating a 2-member subcommittee of the board to work with staff on the responses. Due to the technical nature, a licensee is needed to assist. If a subcommittee is formed, the proposed responses would be provided to the CBA at the July meeting. Alternatively, the CBA could decide not to respond at this time and have staff monitor the comments received and bring to a future meeting for further consideration. AICPA has requested that responses be received by August 21st, 2017. And I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Okay. Is there any other questions or comments from the board? Would anyone be interested in being part of a 2-person subcommittee?
I don't know if there's any reason to really respond to it. I mean,
Okay.
it's going to create some reporting changes, maybe some auditing changes, and those are the kinds of things then that our peer review processes and all that would check off against. I didn't see a compelling reason to necessarily have to insert ourselves into it, you know, in terms of adding anything else. It looks like the DOL, the AICPA, the various firms, there's a lot of stakeholders involved already.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Oh, Ms. Wright?
Thank you. Was NASBA involved in this at all? I remember DOL and that they came to us, and I knew AICPA, but I don't know.
I don't believe so.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No, not that, yeah. Wait, we can check, but I don't think that was the case. All right. So, any other comments? Any comments or questions from the public? Okay, thank you very much. All right, moving on to item D, discussion regarding the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants and National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, proposed changes in the 7th edition of the Uniform Accountancy Act. Welcome back, Mr. Bone.
Thank you. Nice to be with you again. Alrighty. The purpose of this item, Madam President, is to seek approval from the board to issue a comment letter regarding the proposed changes to the Uniform Accountancy Act, which is issued by the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy and the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. This latest version of the Uniform Accounting Act, which I will refer to as the UAA, was distributed to the various boards of accountancy and other organizations for comment. The UAA and its companion model rules are intended to help the various state boards of accountancy provide a consistent approach to regulating the CPA profession. Many of the CBA's statutes and regulations mirror portions of the previous UAA, but we do maintain our own rules that are separate and apart from the UAA. This version of the UAA contains a number of minor and non-substantive changes. There are, however, 3 changes outlined on pages 2 and 3 of the write-up for the agenda item that I'd like to bring to your attention. Those 3 items are, first, the inclusion of a definition of preparation of financial statements. 2, deletion of the NASBA Model Code of Conduct because it was determined to be duplicative of the AICPA's Code of Conduct. And third, deletion of the legislative policy of the AICPA. That legislative policy is a product solely of the AICPA and not NASBA, and the inclusion of that legislative policy in previous versions of the UAA was determined to be a barrier to states adopting the UAA. Because the CBA maintains its own rules, the adoption of the updated UAA would not impact or conflict with CBA regulations. Staff recommend the CBA approve a comment letter in support of the updated UAA and model rules, and a draft is provided in attachment 2. Comments are due by June 30th, so if a letter is approved by the board, staff request authority be delegated to the president and the executive officer to make any required edits following the conclusion of today's meeting. This concludes my remarks, Madam President.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions from the board regarding the comment letter? Wow, that was easy. Okay, so we just need to, is anyone interested in, we need a motion for this, correct? All right. If you want a comment, so if we want a comment letter, we need to have a motion. Does anyone want to have a comment letter? Do we want to provide one? All right. Then we don't need a motion. All right, you guys are being so efficient today. I love it. All right, well, thank you very much.
It's after lunch.
I know, we're all energized. It's fantastic. All right.
Well, where is the, so you had a draft letter in here.
Attachment 2.
Right.
I'm sorry, I was trying to get to my,
Oh, sorry about that.
and basically just being supportive of, I mean, this is sort of right in our bailiwick, right? I mean, I know any UAA changes would, to the extent that they're not already sort of exactly that way in our regs, would have to require further regulatory action, right, on our part to get there. But yeah, I would move that we send a comment letter along the lines of what's been included in attachment 2.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second?
All right. Any other discussion or comments from the board? Any comments or discussion from the public? Okay, with that, we'll call for a vote.
Kathleen Wright,
Yes?
Mark Silverman,
Yes.
Michael Savoy,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson,
Yes.
Sunny Youngsun Park,
Yes?
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
Larry Kaplan,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Yes.
George Pamela,
Yes.
Jose Campos,
Yes.
and Alicia Burhow.
Yes. Okay, with that, the vote is unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. All right, moving on to item E, update on the California Board of Accountancy's 2016 to 2018 strategic plan. Again, Mr. Bone, take it away.
Thank you, Madam President. The purpose of this item is to provide the board an update regarding the implementation of that strategic plan. The current plan was approved by the board during the September 2015 CBA meeting and includes 7 goals as follows: enforcement, licensing, customer service, outreach, laws and regulations, emerging technologies, and organizational effectiveness. Each of these 7 goals also include multiple sub-goals. The plan also discusses the CBA's mission, vision, and values. The write-up for this agenda item contains information about the progress made of one objective under each of those 7 goals. For the sake of time, I won't read through them all, but I will point out that the CBA has made substantial progress in each of the 7 goals that I mentioned a moment ago. In addition to what is stated in the agenda item, I'd like to share a couple of other examples, if I may, of the progress that the CBA has made towards your strategic plan objectives. As discussed under a couple of agenda items ago, item 1B related to the CBA meeting in September at CSU Fullerton, that effort to engage with that university and develop an outreach event will help meet the CBA strategic plan objective 4.1. and the tablet computers that many of you are using today to view meeting materials and reduce paper consumption helps to meet Objective 6.3. Madam President, this concludes my remarks, and I'm turning it back to you for any comments, questions, or discussion.
Are there any comments or questions from the board regarding the strategic plan?
Yeah, I had one question.
Yeah.
Bottom of page 3, top of page 4, so we talk about this item 6.1, and we give, I know we've been on this wonderful journey with Breeze, but there's a sentence on here with respect to, in the interim, coming up with an alternative solution. What's our prognosis on that? I mean, it seemed to be a big stop sign previously on anything we could do independently, and is that still the case, or do we see some flexibility?
So in the weeks ahead following this meeting, we'll actually be meeting with the Department of Consumer Affairs or IT staff on an interim plan, at least for the acceptance of credit card payments. It's not going to be the transition to Breeze, but it will be what kind of interim option might we have so we can accept online credit card payments. We're actually scheduled to do that, and then we postponed just slightly because of the move to our new location. Beyond that, we have a second meeting that will be scheduled, and that discussion will be to start the dialogue on the transition to Breeze or some other system that will include all the other features, not just the online credit card payment. So as far as prioritizing our resources, we thought that the online credit card payment was a higher priority and probably more reasonably accomplished with our resources. And then second, we would go into that larger discussion regarding a transition to some type of larger system. So I would suspect by probably the July meeting, we could have more details and an update, and possibly something with more target dates around the September timeframe.
That'd be helpful.
Any other comments or questions from the board? I do want to thank the board members and staff for the work that they have done with strategic planning. It's not an easy thing to do, and I'm glad to see that we're accomplishing some of our goals. So thank you very much for that. Any comments from the public? Okay, with that, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item F, developments since the February 2015 United States Supreme Court decision, North Carolina State Board of Dental Examiners versus the Federal Trade Commission. Ms. Shields.
I have no report for this item.
Wow, moving right along. I love it. All right, well, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item G, the Department of Consumer Affairs Director's Report on Developmental Activities. Mr. Burke could not be here this afternoon. He was going to give a report on the state budget, the DCA strategic plan, DCA leadership training, and the required board member trainings. That is going to be moved to Ms. Bauer's executive officer's report that will be coming up, I guess, in the next month. So we are going to be moving forward on that. So are there any questions, though? Do I need to ask questions from the public? You never know. I know, I'm moving along. All right, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to go on to item 3, the report of the Secretary Treasurer, Mr. Silverman.
Thank you, Madam President. Budget, we'll first discuss the CBA's fiscal year 2016-17 budget is set at $14,099,000. The governor's proposed budget for the CBA for fiscal year 2017-18 is $13,410,000. Revenues and total receipts. The CBA collected approximately $7.6 million in revenues as of March 31st. Total revenues increased approximately 97% from the same period in 2015-16. Most of this substantial increase in revenue results from the CBA's 2-year fee reduction coming to an end on June 30th, 2016. Revenues for 2016-17 are projected to be approximately $10.1 million. Expenditures. Total expenditures through March 31st, 2017 are at $10,440,725, which is slightly higher than the same period last year. Although personnel costs decreased due to the expiration of some limited term positions, there was an increase in attorney general costs and items related to the CBA relocation, including printing expenses, office equipment, and other essential items for the new office. Minor equipment expenditures for fiscal year 2016-17 are elevated due to the purchase of IT equipment necessary for the new location. As previously reported, other areas that continue to be elevated are printing and postage due to the mailing of the CBA's update publication, outreach mailings to CPA licensure candidates, and notification to all licensees of the CBA's relocation and the mailing of all license renewal applications. Additionally, training costs are high, which can be attributed to outside contracts for investigative techniques training and continuing education courses for investigative CPAs. Enforcement expenditures have increased over the prior 4 fiscal years as demonstrated on attachment 4. There's been a 10% increase from the same period in 2015-16. Fund condition and general fund loan repayment. The CBA ended fiscal year 2015-16 with 10.4 months in the accountancy fund reserve. Year-end expenditures exceeded total revenues by approximately $7.6 million, but when combined with the June 2016 general fund loan repayment of $10.27 million plus $2.9 million in interest, the CBA reserve experienced an overall increase to $12.6 million. In January 2017, the Department of Finance released its loan obligation report, which identified targets for repayment of the CBA loans made to the general fund. Presently, the CBA has approximately $21 million in loans outstanding. The loan obligation reflects the following repayment schedule for fiscal year 2016-17 of $21 million. The CBA will receive the remaining loan repayments plus interest in June of the current fiscal year. The proposed loan repayments for fiscal year 2016-17 will be finalized once the governor signs the budget. Should the loans be repaid as scheduled and proposed, the CBA's reserve will increase significantly to 27.3 months by the end of fiscal year 2016-17. In terms of authorized positions, as reflected on attachment 6, the CBA presently has 90.9 authorized positions. This will decrease beginning July 1st, 2017, as a result of the following limited term positions being eliminated: 1 enforcement division management position and 5 enforcement division analytical positions. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Do I have any questions? Ms. Wright?
Mike, is this correct? 90.9 authorized positions? Oh, authorized position. I thought, okay, I'm sorry. Scratch that. I thought that was 90.9 open positions.
Oh,
And I thought, good Lord,
that would not be
going on up there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, is the enforcement positions that they're no longer going to have going forward, is that going to cause a backlog or a return to a backlog potentially?
The enforcement positions were originally limited term positions, and so we had anticipated the elimination of them, and so we had planned for that.
so we don't get any no replacement positions for that position?
Other than authorized positions that we have, full-time permanent positions that are vacant and we can fill, any additional enforcement resources, we would need to justify and pursue that through the budget change proposal. But the ones that are identified as terminating are ones that we knew we would terminate.
And so at this time, you're not anticipating going for additional full-time positions in that area?
We're exploring that.
Okay.
But nothing available to share at this time. But we're always, every year, when we go through the budget change proposal process, we explore internally what our resource needs are. But I would say in the immediate future, probably not.
Okay. Thank you.
What's the days in reserve or months in reserve goal, or what came out of the sunset review recommendations?
Yeah. When we were going through the hearings and through some of the various committee meetings, they had shown their support for us to stay at the 24-month, the higher end of the months in reserve.
So 24-month was sort of the recommended piece.
Any other questions or comments from the board? When do we get our check? Not soon enough. Soon. Any comments or questions from the public? Okay, with that, thank you very much, Mr. Silverman. Okay, let's see. Going on to item 4, report of the executive officer, Ms. Bowers.
Thank you. First item, very excited. The update on the relocation of the board office. It has finally occurred. We are moved in, fully moved in, and so very excited, and members, stakeholders will have an opportunity to view the new site when we hold our July board meeting on site. And so we're right now exploring how we might offer some type of tour through the facility, and that we might invite some other guests, including the governor's office, maybe representatives from the department and agency. So we're working those plans out now. Item 2 under my report, I do not have an update on staffing. And so with the permission of Madam President, I will invite Erin Bone to come forward and cover the remaining 2 items under my report.
Thank you, Madam President and board members. Item 4C is the stakeholder satisfaction survey. The purpose of this item is to give the board an update on the responses that we've received thus far during the current fiscal year and provide the board members an opportunity to provide input. I would like to note that the development and implementation of this survey to gather feedback from our stakeholders helps to meet CBA Strategic Plan Objective 3.1. But getting to the report, as of March 31st, 164 individuals have participated in the survey, and I'm very pleased to tell you that the vast majority of survey participants report being satisfied or very satisfied with the interactions that they have with the CBA, including the timeliness with which staff responds to their needs or inquiries. However, over the same period of time, we did receive 33 comments from respondents who had negative concerns. Those individuals mainly expressed concern with the length of time that it takes to process paper-based applications and renewals, and some did express dissatisfaction with the service that they received. The attachment to this item contains charts that provide a visual breakdown of those survey responses. Upon conclusion of this fiscal year, CBA staff will analyze the survey results and consider how to address the concerns expressed by those respondents. We will also consider whether changes should be made to the survey to ensure that we are capturing the appropriate input from our stakeholders. This concludes my remarks, Madam President. I will turn it back to you.
Any comments or questions from the board?
Yeah, I got a couple questions. So appreciate getting this update. This is good to see.
Great.
Under the stakeholder question that you pose in the survey, or that we pose in the survey,
Yeah.
if you're a California licensee, where would you wouldn't really have a box to check, right? So you may want to consider whether we put an option for that in there.
So I'm looking at the attachments, Mr. Campos, and the first box where it says, which of the following categories of stakeholders best describes you? And so the options are California licensed CPA, applicant for CPA licensure. Do you see the same?
Oh, I was looking at your memo. Okay, I didn't
Oh.
focus back there. So page 1 of the memo has like 5 bullets, and I don't know if those line up with what you had in the other chart.
I apologize. That was a misprint,
Okay,
Mr. Campos.
so you do have that, and then
My apologies.
do you get anything from a regulator type? I mean, I don't know if that's ever, I guess they would check other and kind of give you, does other allow them to describe what that means?
Yes, respondents can type, they have a free form where they can provide other input. I don't recall seeing any regarding, regulators or some of those other maybe stakeholders that
So if you're another, member of another state board of accountancy, or a person from another state board of accountancy, you would check other and then give you some indication of what you're doing. Okay.
That'd be an option, but I don't recall seeing a response to that effect, sir.
So those are the only couple that kind of came to mind there. The next one was, I'm looking at your memo, and
Yes.
So page 2 in the middle, we say, here are the questions we ask, right, and get satisfaction. And you have one on how the website's organized, But do we explicitly ask, are you able to find what you need on our website? Or, what's your ability to access the information? I mean, we're putting a lot of stuff out there, right? Handbook, guidelines, all these different things. If you're somebody interested in practicing in California, and you might be a CPA from a different state, right? Are you able to get at what you need? And so you may want to craft a question in the survey that not only deals with the organization. I think it's implicit in that question, but I would be more explicit with the item.
Thank you for that.
Any other comments? Oh, Ms.
I
Neal?
would love, I know that we're still analyzing this, and it's great that we're getting feedback on a regular basis from our constituents, but I would love to see if in the following meeting, we can see the action plan coming out of the findings.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Bell, and I was tweeted this question regarding online, being able to, I know, it's exciting, to be able to renew online, or, I mean, where are we in that process? I know, so.
That was the discussion we were just having.
I know, so, I mean, I don't know how far along we are with this.
So in the next couple weeks, actually, we'll be sitting down with our members of our IT team and members of the department's IT team, and actually working out the logistics in being able to provide that online tool. I think that's not years away. I don't want to say, I can't project a time frame until after that meeting in the next couple of weeks, but I would say that plan is sooner rather than later, and we're really focusing on the online payment aspect, and so that would definitely involve the renewal, perhaps even online payment for other areas within the board, but renewal would certainly be a focus of that.
But just to be clear, I think when people talk about renewals, the payment is one piece of it, but it's the continuing education submission and the all the other things that you have to fill out electronically that ideally some of that stuff could be pre-populated from prior submittals. But that's the piece that, my impression is that's the piece where we really have to understand the Breeze solution and whether or not we'd be permitted to do something separate and apart from whatever the Breeze tie-in.
That was my question too. Would this be separate from what DCA is doing, or, with all the funding we have, could we do it on our own in order to make it more efficient?
So there's been an agreement with the department that part of this exploration would allow us to consider what, as an individual board, might be allowable. And so that's part of that dialogue. So we have a commitment to explore that. We don't have an absolute green light, but I think definitely there is support from the department with the board, considering that we do have IT resources that we can utilize internally that wouldn't impact the department, that I think they're coming to the meeting certainly to engage us in the possibility of doing that.
Ms. Shields?
Just, you might want to put this on a future agenda item so you
Oh,
can
got
have
it.
a full discussion about all the different options you can explore in
Oh.
doing online renewals or other types of electronic application
Communication.
processes.
All
Yes.
right, noted. All right, thank you very much. Any other comments or questions from the board? Any comments from the public? Okay, thank you very much for that item, and by all means, please continue.
Thank you. Madam President and board members, I'm happy to provide a few updates on our recent outreach efforts. Last month, Mobility Stakeholder Group and former CBA member Dawn Driftmeyer spoke to about 150 Orange Coast College students regarding the CPA licensure requirements that was held over 2 different days. Earlier this week, CBA staff spoke to 25 students and academic advisors at the University of California, Davis, which is located just west of Sacramento. We were invited by the Internship and Career Center so we could help interested students better understand the pathway to licensure. The event was co-sponsored by Becker CPA Exam Review and a student organization, the Davis Accounting Society. In addition, the CBA has begun to increase its activity levels on the social media platforms of Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. LinkedIn has been particularly successful, due in great part, I believe, to the high concentration of professionals that use that service. Recent example, a post written about that UC Davis outreach event I just mentioned was viewed by more than 1,800 individuals. Following this meeting, we will begin efforts to prepare for the September CBA meeting, which we discussed earlier, to be held at CSU Fullerton, and we look forward to engaging area stakeholders in that outreach opportunity. This concludes my remarks, Madam President.
Alrighty. Is there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments from the public? Okay, with that, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 5, report of the Enforcement Advisory Committee, Qualifications Committee, and Peer Review Oversight Committee. We will begin with the Enforcement Advisory Committee with Mr. Rosenbaum.
Good afternoon. This is the report for the Enforcement Advisory Committee. The last meeting of the Enforcement Advisory Committee was on May the 4th in Burbank. I'd like to thank Mr. Campos for attending our meeting and providing an overview of the CBA's activities, particularly from the last meeting in March. At our meeting, our members reviewed and provided feedback on 20 closed cases. We also concluded 3 investigative hearings. Our next meeting will be July 6th at the new offices in Sacramento.
We're excited. Is there any questions or comments from the board members?
I would add one thing. I mean, a lot of good work happening at the EAC. One opportunity that I had while I was there is, our enforcement process, disciplinary process, and then probationary outcomes come to mind. And in conjunction or at the time that these meetings are happening, probably not direct EAC activity, but there are also probation orientations that are happening for our various individuals. And so I got an opportunity to observe at least one of those orientation processes, just to see how the outcomes from here get translated and communicated, frankly, at a very detailed level to the licensees who've been subjected to some discipline, and making sure that there's an understanding of what the terms of, be it a settlement agreement, whatever the items might be. And so that is something that happens in connection with that, and I thought that was very, very helpful.
Great. Any other comments or questions? Are there comments or questions from the public? Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item B, Qualifications Committee, Mr. Evans.
Good afternoon, President Burhow, members of the board. I'm David Evans, Chair of the Qualifications Committee, and I'm pleased to be here with you today. The Qualifications Committee met back on April 26th at the Department of Consumer Affairs in Sacramento, and I'd like to thank Member Salazar and Ms. Bowers and Mr. Simcox for being in attendance at that meeting. At that meeting, there were a total of 4 Section 69 reviews and 2 personal appearances, and all 6 were recommended for approval. As assigned by this board, the committee reviewed the Certificate of Attest Experience form for necessary revisions or clarifications due to the changes regarding the American Society of CPAs Statement on Standards for Accounting and Review Services, SARS number 21, which identifies preparation engagements as non-attest service. The committee made recommendations for these changes to staff, and I understand they will be presented to you at your next meeting on July 20th and 21st. Our next meeting of the Qualifications Committee will take place on July 26th in Pasadena. This concludes my report. I turn the time over to Ms. Salazar if she cares to make any comments.
The one thing I would say is thank you so much for your service to the committee and also the board. And again, it may sound like a broken record, but we do have some newer board members. If you've not had the chance to attend one of the meetings, I would encourage you to coordinate with staff and try to attend, because it is a great opportunity to see the heavy lifting that's done by our committee chairs and our committee members. So I would like to thank you again for your hard work.
Thank you very much.
Any questions or comments from the board? Any comments from the public? And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item C, Peer Review Oversight Committee, Mr. DeLizer.
Thank you. The Peer Review Oversight Committee, which I will refer to throughout both of these items as the PROC or just the committee, held our last meeting on May 5th in Burbank, California, just a couple of weeks ago. And I'd like to thank Ms. Park for attending that meeting and providing an overview of the CBA's activities at their last meeting in March. In addition to welcoming Ms. Park, we also welcomed the new member that the board appointed in March, Sharon Selleck. At our meeting, members presented and reported on various oversight activities that took place between our February 3rd meeting and the May 5th meeting. We also again considered the AICPA white paper entitled Proposed Evolution of Peer Review Administration, released in January of 2017, and I'll provide a report on that discussion as part of my next agenda item. The PROC took its next step on the evaluation of the peer reviewer population also. Late last year, the CBA had added this responsibility to our committee, and to assist in developing a framework for the evaluation of that population, we reviewed and approved a letter that we'll send to the AICPA as well as the California Society of CPAs, inquiring really three general things. One, the minimum number of peer reviewers or the expectations regarding the number of peer reviewers that will be necessary in order to handle the volume of peer reviews in the state upcoming. And then what procedures and efforts have been established regarding recruitment of peer reviewers and retention of those peer reviewers, as well as statistical information on current and historical population of peer reviewers. That letter will go out at the end of this month with a requested response by July 31st of 2017. During the discussion on this item, the PROC received a comment from a member of the California Society that was there, that the Society does not maintain, nor does it have access to all of the information that will be requested in that letter. And further stated that they were unsure exactly what information the AICPA may have with respect to those three items that we'd like to know more about. However, the PROC believes that it's important to begin with this step and start the dialogue with the AICPA and with the California Society on this topic so that we can assess what information is available and begin to get more information as we move forward. Lastly, in that meeting, the PROC discussed certain general peer review related statistics that the CBA staff were able to compile for us, and we'll continually evaluate those statistics on a biannual basis each year and to identify trends and look at those things. Our next meeting will be held August 25th at the CBA's new office in Sacramento. That's all on the May meeting. Are there any questions?
Any questions or comments from the board? Any comments from the public? Okay, can we move on to your next item? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Park. Sorry about that.
Okay, all the members were very appreciative of having a member from the board. And also one item that came up was I discussed the court case regarding the personal email account as it relates to the CBA businesses. And the members were seeking further guidance on, more detailed guidance on that issue.
Okay, I'll just do, just to make Ms. Shields happy, any other comments from the public? I want to make you happy. That's that's what matters to me. All right, thank you. You want to go on to your next item?
All right, next item. The topic of peer review administration has been something that the PROC and the CBA have been discussing for much of the last year. In fact, I think I've reported on it the last 2 or 3 times that I've come out. The AICPA has now issued multiple white papers on this topic, with the initial proposed model being a significant reduction of peer review administering entities, reducing them to potentially like 8 or 10 that review a minimum of 1,000 peer reviews a year. That has been revised, and the new modified version now has no reduction, but has also now set various benchmarks that an administering entity would have to agree to and meet. As members may recall, at your last meeting, I requested that the CBA table a decision on whether to comment on the most recent AICPA white paper so that the PROC could consider new information that had come to light since our February meeting. The new information included comment letters from NASBA and various state societies that responded to the prior iteration of the AICPA's Evolution of Peer Review white paper, and a PowerPoint presentation that was done by NASBA. at their recent executive directors meeting in March. Those documents are attachments 4, 5, and 6 in the packages that you have. NASBA and the other state societies had noted concerns regarding transparency, the peer review cost, and the peer reviewer population. At our recent meeting, the PROC took this information under consideration and after discussion determined that it didn't impact or change the PROC's prior recommendation to the CBA to simply support efforts to enhance the effectiveness of peer reviews. And at this time, we do not believe that the CBA needs to issue a comment letter. I'd like to turn the discussion back over to the president.
All right. I'd like to open it up for comment or questions from the board. Mr. Campos?
Yeah, so maybe tell me a little bit more about your thoughts on why no comment letter. Is it because the nature of what's been commented already in these other letters gets at the key things that would be of concern to the PROC and potentially the CBA? I know you mentioned these 3 themes around transparency and a couple other items that you just mentioned. Or would we be better served if we re-emphasized whatever those key themes are in our own letter from the CBA?
The CBA has issued a letter, I believe it was signed by Ms. Salazar as president, where it stated that the CBA's position was it supported the efforts that the AICPA is undertaking to enhance peer review and improve audit quality overall through this. It noted the key issue to the CBA at that point, and continues to be, is the peer reviewer population. I believe it was at that time that the CBA then kind of asked the PROC to evaluate that peer reviewer population and move forward. The most recent iteration of this white paper has little effect to the state of California's administering entity. Even the earliest iteration, where there was a minimum of 1,000 peer reviews administered and those kind of things, the California Society already administers more than 1,000 peer reviews. Most of their practices meet these benchmarking items that are included in the new white paper. And so at this point in time, the impact directly to California, it may not be as great as what it may be to some other smaller states and those kinds of things. And so at this point in time, we were thinking that the already issued letter is sufficient.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Any other comments? Any comments from the public? That. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to go ahead and move on to item 6, report from the enforcement chief, Mr. Franzella.
Thank you. Item 6A is the enforcement activity report. The report covers 9 months worth of data through March 31st, 2017. So I'll just kind of go a little bit page by page. Please feel free to ask any questions along the way. Beginning with complaints. So far, we received just over 2,000 complaints, with nearly 1,700 being assigned for investigation. And we've received just about 300 complaints since over the last 2 months. And we're basically on pace to receive a similar number of complaints as the prior 2 fiscal years. As for the investigations, so far this fiscal year, we continue to be able to close more cases than we've assigned. So that's helping us keep the average day to close at 154 days and keeping that lower than prior fiscal years. And so I'm hoping that trend will continue. Regrettably, we do have a large volume. As we reported last time, we had a bubble behind the other 24 months, and it seems to have popped. And we have 137 cases now, although we do have 36 pending the review process, and we have closed 59 cases so far this year. One of the things that we're exploring at this point is really working with the EAC and helping us address this inventory and such as identifying cases at an earlier stage where investigative hearings can be taken place, and then assisting us even at the complaint intake process so that we can try to identify cases at an earlier stage that may be able to get closed before they start to age on us unnecessarily. So those are a couple of steps in trying to make the EAC more involved in the process and helping us with our aging inventory. Moving on to discipline. This
Can
is
I
on-
interrupt you?
Please.
Could I take you back to your first page on complaints?
Of course.
And one item that I know from a mobility standpoint, mobility legislative standpoint, you know, monitoring referrals we get from other state boards of accountancy, and we may have mentioned this before, but would it be possible, and would this even be the right place to maybe track or give transparency to the referrals we might be seeing coming in from other state boards of accountancy?
We can. We do have the mobility section further on in the report. So this tries to just coalesce all of it into like one area. But we draw more, or we deep dive into it a bit more in the mobility section. So
That might
that
be
could be
better.
another place to add that and more closely show that particular number there. But I'll do it in either spot, whatever the board feels is appropriate.
I don't think you need it in two places, but yeah, just I think we should begin to give that some tracking transparency. That would be helpful.
Absolutely.
Oh, Ms. Wright?
While we're on the first page of Dominic, of your report, it does say that over the course of the past 2 months, the top external complaint has been tax-related.
Yes, and that's pretty common. I mean, it generally is the top external complaint is tax-related. It doesn't mean our volume is primarily tax. Most of it is probably failed peer reviews, license renewal deficiencies, but as for the external complaints, the top one is tax. Okay. So moving on to discipline, which is on page 3. We've referred 97 cases to the AG's office, so we will likely exceed last year's total of 105. And through the first 9 months, the CBA has taken discipline on 64 matters. This doesn't include an additional 11 cases that the CBA acted on and at its March meeting that took effect in April. And obviously, it doesn't include the volume you have in this particular meeting that'll take effect prior to the close of the fiscal year. So this likely will bring the number in excess to what the board had done previously, which was its previous high of disciplinary cases, so we'll be exceeding that. As for citations, this is page 4. We've issued 108 citations. As I've been reporting, this reduction is a result of increased outreach. The division is performing at the onset of the investigation to work on compliance from licensees. Our top cause for citation is CE, and it's primarily the annual CE, the 20 and 12 requirement. And so far this year, we're actually now on our second it's their third violation of the 20 and 12, but it's their second citation already of dealing with it. We've issued 10 citations for repeat offenders. And so we're monitoring that, and we'll probably be updating the board just so we can keep an eye on it. We are doing all the outreach we can. We're always trying to be more creative and trying to get this information across, but it's not sinking in for certain individuals, and the citation fine is going up considerably to try to get compliance going forward. Moving on to probation monitoring, the board has 133 individuals on probation, which is the most it's had, and that number is going to continue to grow. We've recently conducted a number of probation orientations. This includes 7 telephonic orientations conducted with individuals that reside either out of state or in remote areas of California, so we try to make sure we get to them as early as possible. So if we can't get them before the EAC or get them into the board's office, we'll make the phone calls to go over the orientations. We had 11 face-to-face orientations at the May meeting. As Mr. Campos said, it was a pleasure having him sit in. And staff also conducted 2 practice investigations before the EAC meeting, the day before the EAC meeting. Also on that page is the mobility. We continue to perform the required SEC and PCAOB websites for individuals that have been disciplined by these agencies, and informing them they must seek CBA authorization prior to practicing under mobility. So far, we have 41 SEC disciplines identified and 27 PCAOB disciplines identified. We used to do this just in January and July, we're required to do it every 6 months. But staff have implemented a procedure to just do it on a monthly basis. So that's why the numbers are a little bit higher already this year. because we're ahead of where we would normally be. And so far this fiscal year, we've revoked two practice privileges. On a final note, the division highlights, we are presently fully staffed on our permanent positions and until today, where we received word that one of our analysts is relocating, so we'll be recruiting for that position. But we are still recruiting for one or two limited term ICPA positions, one ICPA retired annuitant, and then one limited term office technician position. And with that, I'll turn it back over to President Burhow and be happy to answer any questions.
Just real quick, and I'll get to you, Ms. Wright. So how long are those limited term positions for?
The two limited term ICPA positions would be for 2 years. For 2 years. Same with the limited office technician position.
Okay.
And the RA is just a half-time position that we would maintain filling as long as the individual was working out and wanted to maintain the position.
Ms. Wright?
I don't want to create any additional work at all, but Dominic, of the tax-related matters that are the primary source of external complaints, just more or less off the top of your head, where do they normally end up? Do they end up in, I mean, I presume they end up in investigation because that's the next step, but do they end up with discipline, or are they closed, or is there any way to summarize, or not really?
I mean, it could end up in any one of those. A lot of times they're fee disputes, and the board doesn't have any authority over fee disputes, so those are closed at intake, so we really don't have that jurisdiction. We still capture it as a tax-related issue because that's where it came from, or with the genesis of it. So they could be closed at intake, there could be no violation found, or it could end up in discipline, and I know we've been bringing a few tax matters recently, but just bear in mind that while it's the top external complaint, it's definitely not the largest volume of professional standards issues that we deal with. Primarily, it's the audits, compilations, the attestation services that really see their way to the board's disciplinary.
Right. That was why I asked the question, because we see a few when from the pink sheets, but not that many.
Yeah.
Are there questions from the members? Any other questions from the public? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to item number 7, the report from the licensing chief. Ms. Sanchez, welcome back. Thank you.
It's my first time with my electronic device, so
I
please
know.
be patient
Gotta
with
love
me. It's
technology.
working quite well, so, but you never know when it comes down to it. Okay, first we'll start with the licensing activity report. This report reflects the licensing division statistics through March 31st, 2017. I would like to begin by informing the board that the telephone statistics are up and running, so I should have numbers to report at the July CPA meeting. Moving on into exams in regards to the examination and initial licensing unit, beginning on page 2. The new version of the CPA exam was released as of April 1st. Although this did not demand any internal process changes for us, we did see a jump in numbers for repeat sitter applications, trying to finish up those sections. And as you can see, our repeat sitter timeframes are very low. So when they come in, even if there's an abundance of them, they're a pretty quick turnaround for our unit. Beginning at the bottom of page 3 identifies the statistics for initial licensure. This unit has licensed over 2,300 individual CPAs and over 200 accountancy firms so far this year. Going all the way down to page 7 is our total licensee population, which as of March 31st was at 102,499 licensees. The remaining pages detail the statistics of the renewal and continuing competency unit, and that concludes my report for the licensing division. I'd like to turn it back over to the president.
Any comments or questions from the board?
Yeah, I got a couple questions. On what page is this? Can't tell. The individual license applications data. So just reflecting back on the survey results, there were some observations in there about length of time around renewals and licensing applications, if I read that correctly. And I see an average here to process, and probably primarily interested in renewals and new licensees. I think it would be helpful going forward, and I don't know how you track this data, if it's just a straight average or similar to what we get on the enforcement side, if there's some kind of aging of, okay, I mean, a good majority of these are gonna be under 30 days, just looking at your averages. But looks like there's some stuff that's probably over 60 and maybe over 90, and it might be helpful to give some aging view going forward on what's happening there, just so that we can connect the dots between what we might be seeing in these survey results and what's happening operationally in the licensing unit around this.
Absolutely, we can absolutely provide those. One thing that we should keep in mind when we're looking at our statistics, when there is what we try to portray out to outreach events and anyone that calls in, is that when they do apply, the best way to get it through, the fastest way to get it through is to make sure the application is complete. Give us your transcripts ahead of time, because those can take time. We do not accept them electronically, so they can take time from the college to get to us. And if upon our initial review, the first time my technician or analyst looks at that application, if they have all the documents there and there's no deficiencies, that is very, very close to 30 days, if not under 30 days when it comes to initial licensure and first-time sitters. The delays most of the time come from, we didn't get all the transcripts, maybe a transcript was a little bit delayed, we did our first review, a transcript comes in, that gets processed, we have to pull that file a second time, look at it again, and then do that. So I can actually give you statistics for which we provide to the legislature annually called licensing performance measures, where we break those two types of applications apart. Complete applications that we can license upon first review, and deficient or incomplete applications that may take 2 or 3 times to look at before they're in full compliance. So I can provide those for you, and that's in regards to initial licensure and examination. In regards to renewals, we're continually looking for ways to improve and speed up that process, again, with credit card and things like that. We're hoping that will do that. But I can definitely break down more statistics and renewals as well.
I think that would be very, because you went to the second thing. Once you start identifying something that's, say, over 90 days, then the question is going to be what's holding it up in those territories. And so giving some color, whether it's a narrative footnote or what have you. I don't think we need to repeat what you do annually with the legislature on every single month. I mean, I don't know how time-consuming that would be, and I'm not asking for that, but I think we want to get a little more insight so we can have the right dialogue at this level. And clearly, from a renewal standpoint, I mean, the lack of automation is killing us. I mean, that's just at the heart of why it's taking a licensee forever to submit something and then for you all to process it. The other question I had was certification requests. What is in those numbers? Is this are these at test experience certifications or what?
No, I believe certification requests are, I believe those are the ones that come from other states to certify that is a licensed CPA from this state. So we get those a lot. And we
Can you
definitely
put a
try
little
and do those
footnote on
within
that
30
going
days.
forward on
Yes.
what these things
What is-
represent? Yeah, 'cause okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, like conversion requests, we can add a little bit more information there too.
Great. That was it.
I'll let you write that down. So I just had a quick question. So if you can just clarify, so how long does it take for a student to get their transcripts how long do they have to get their transcripts and then get them into the CBA board? Because last year, CBA staff and I, we went to USC, and that was kind of one of the issues that some of the students brought up, is sometimes they said they couldn't get, their transcripts fast enough to be able to turn them in on time in order to be able to sit for the initial test. So I was just curious how long they have to get that together.
It is very dependent upon the school, because the transcript must show the conferral of their bachelor degree.
Okay.
So until the registrar, depending on the school and how automated they are to get that conferral actually listed, and then for them to go in and pay for it. And it's just mail time for us, mail time through mailroom to my unit. it's very quick once it actually gets into USPS. It really is dependent on quickly how inundated the school is in getting
Right.
the number of students' transcripts to the various agencies that they need to get those to. So, during I consider our high time, like graduation season, June, July, December, January, February, those, they might take a little longer, whereas those who graduate, in the other times of the year, transcripts come a lot faster.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Any other comment? Oh, Ms. Mayor?
I think the dialogue that we're having might be very fruitful to bring us FAQs or watch outs for the students when we're at Cal State Fullerton in September.
Definitely.
And we do have those handouts. We'll make sure they're included in all outreach events.
Yeah, and we
That's a
have,
good
yeah,
idea.
we have that at USC too. We brought,
Tons.
CBA members brought that paperwork over as well. Ms. Ray, this question?
Oh, no, I was just smiling because that's exactly what, she read my mind. Exactly what I was thinking is that you're gonna be there, right?
At Fullerton, most likely. I don't think attendance has been 100% determined yet, but I am open to being there,
We will
absolutely.
figure that out.
Yes.
We'll figure it out. Any other comments or questions from the board? Any comments from the public? With that, thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay. Moving on, I think we're gonna be moving on to committee reports.
I think you got topic 2.
Oh, we have one more topic? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I kind of went like this and
Oh,
came
I
back,
know.
so I'm back.
All right, well, I'm good, that's good, because I've missed you so much, so I'm glad you're gonna be here for another round. Okay, by all means.
Okay. This is in regards to CBA item 7B, the discussion on experience gained from accountancy firm with a peer review rating of substandard and the potential impact on the quality of an applicant's attest experience for certified public accountant licensure. So this agenda provides the CBA with the opportunity to discuss the potential impact of an accountancy firm's peer review rating of substandard and what effect it may have on an initial applicant's ability to satisfy the attest experience requirement. Although there is no specific action requested by staff, we welcome any input from the CBA. So in order for applicants to attain the authority to sign reports on attest engagements, they must complete 500 hours of experience in attest services. This experience must be under the supervision of a CPA holding a valid active license with the attest authority. CBA Regulation Section 69 allows the CPA to inspect the documents of the work performed by an applicant while gaining that experience by requesting the firm appear before the CBA's qualifications committee. The committee will then review the work papers or other evidence substantiating the experience of an applicant for CPA licensure with the authority to sign attest engagements. The CPA relies on the firm, the CBA, I probably could use some more. The CBA relies on the firm and the supervisor who is signing the experience form to oversee the applicant, ensuring the work was done so in accordance with professional standards. In addition, California requires the accountancy firms, which we've just discussed, perform accounting and auditing services to have a peer review completed once every 3 years. A peer review is defined as a systematic review of an accountancy firm's accounting and auditing services performed by a peer reviewer who is unaffiliated with the firm. This ensures the firm has the appropriate understanding of practical application of professional standards. So in order to ensure the CBA is granting the authority to sign attest engagements to applicants who has received proper training, staff will be implementing an additional internal procedure when reviewing the certificate of attest experience. That is in your attachment 4. You will notice that the supervisor actually has to sign that form. Upon review of an application, staff will consider additional factors related to the supervisor and the accountancy firm's ratings on recent peer reviews. For example, some factors which may be considered: whether there was more than one peer review rating of substandard, the time frame the applicant gained their experience, the history of the accountancy firm, and any other circumstances that may arise when applications are reviewed. If staff determine that additional information is needed prior to licensure, the applicant and/or firm will be may be called before the qualification committee for review of the work papers. That concludes my presentation. Again, although there's no action, I welcome any input or discussion. And at this time, I'd like to turn it back over to the president.
Any comments or questions from the board? Mr. Campos?
So I'm sorry, you said there's an additional step in attachment 4 that you're gonna try to gather some of this information. It's not in this attachment 4 yet?
No, the attachment
Okay.
4 is just the form, just to show that the signer does sign it, the firm information is on it, so we don't need to collect any additional information. What's gonna happen is gonna be a further internal review from licensing staff, doing a little more research on that firm. Has that firm had substandard ratings of peer review? Are they capable to train our, applicants to sign attest reports, engagements? So it's just another proactive way to make sure the firm and the signer are capable of training our new applicants.
So there's some judgment here, right? I mean, there's probably, you mentioned one of them. What's the history? Is it a multiple of substandard reports, or is it one and, previously a number of clean ones? Probably the size of the firm would matter, right? Are you talking about a couple partners, or are you talking about a number, right? And so maybe the reasons for that substandard report. So there's probably a number of variables that we would have to think about in that regard as to how we view it. I think it's good that we're making that linkage to the experience requirement, and then what do we need to do with QC or what have you to evaluate that. But there is some, I think it's not automatic. There'd be some variables here that we'd have to think about.
Definitely, and if a firm has been called before us, before the QC multiple times already and have shown practical understanding, like you said, location of the firms, I mean, there's several, so, so on and so forth. All of those will be taken into consideration, and we'll be working on implementing procedures and a plan for staff, and then, of course, the qualification committee would review those papers and provide a recommendation to staff and CBA.
I had a question for you as a public member, and maybe either you or my fellow board members who are CPAs can answer this. So when a person goes in and does a test and has 500 hours, does that have to be with one CPA? It can be with multiple CPAs in a firm? Or, I mean, because I'm curious about when they get signed off on their 500 hours.
Right.
Who specifically signs that off?
The supervisor that oversees the majority of the work being performed is the one who signs. However, we can receive several certificates of experience.
Okay.
You doesn't have to be at the same firm. It could be at multiple firms. It could be over a very long period of time. Some people have a hard time getting that number, as we saw in the attest survey results. So we could receive several. So we would be providing this extra layer on every form that we got.
Yeah, 'cause I see 500 hours and I'm like, that is a lot of hours for these folks to perform, but.
It's not.
No. All right, never mind. According to Mr. Campos, it's nothing, so.
According to the attest survey that we just had last year, that was confirmed by the stakeholders who participated, that the 500 hours was a good number.
Yeah.
That's nothing, yeah.
Well, to clarify, if you are in the attest function of a firm, it's not a lot to attain. If you are in a different function of a firm and you're trying to get the attest experience, that is more challenging.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the board? Ms. Wright?
Our next agenda item would be to go to the committee reports, is that correct? In other words, the general business section is over?
No, we're still on this section.
Okay, we're still on this item with Gina?
Yes.
Okay, no, then I have a question I wanted to ask when we are at the end of our general meeting discussion, if I could.
Okay. Yeah, we're not.
Okay, then I'll wait.
That till the end.
Yeah, okay.
Not until the very end of?
Well, we have to get through this item.
Yeah, then let's
Ms.
get through this
Sanchez?
item, and then suppose I could ask my question.
Okay, I'm confused.
Maybe.
Are you
Well,
asking
you want
a
me to
question? Are you
ask-
asking a
Is it an
question?
item on the
Let's get
agenda
this,
or
let's
not?
get through this item, and then why don't I just
Is it
voice
an
my
off-agenda item, or is it
No,
related to the
well,
committees?
it certainly is, let me just say.
I think we're done, Gina.
Okay.
And you tell me when I should bring it up.
Well,
is
I mean,
that-
I'm not done yet, so hold that
Okay.
thought. So are there any other comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments or questions from the public?
I did have one.
Yes.
Just wanted to close the loop on this
item.
Okay.
So if you look at the attachment 4 form, one of the things that's bolded on the form is the qualification of experience standard. It says to be considered as qualifying, experience is that which enables the applicant to demonstrate the ability to understand the requirements of planning and conducting a financial statement audit or perform other attached services with minimum supervision that results in an opinion on full disclosure financial statements. So looking at this issue, it's not qualifying if they got the experience under an audit that failed.
Okay.
So that's one thing to consider. I mean, they're not qualified if they're not performing to standard. If that audit didn't perform to standard, how can you claim that as qualifying experience? That's another way of looking at it. So, interesting.
Well, we might be mixing apples and oranges with that. I mean, I think that results in an opinion on the financial statements. That's the audit report that is issued by the firm.
Sure.
Whereas I think what we were speaking about is the peer review result or opinion.
Right, but I think what I'm talking about is the experience that enables the applicant to demonstrate the ability to understand the requirements. That's the aspect that I was focusing on. Is if they haven't received the training or supervision
Right.
to standard, how can they say that they understand what the standard is? That's kind of what I was getting to.
But when they get a deficient peer review, there are opportunities to clear that up.
Right, but that's my point. That's what you'd be focusing on in the analysis at the QC level.
So you need to then outreach that if your firm has a bad peer review, you better not be putting it on your experience qualifications.
Oops.
Well, I mean, otherwise it creates more work for the CBA.
Right, and
check
I
to see.
think the staff are willing to put that work in if that happens, is what the point of this item is that they are willing to examine that aspect.
But if they never put it down as
But
experience to
it
begin
sounds like
with.
there's some judgment here, and it sounds like there'd be more deliberations going forward.
Right.
Okay. Do you want me to ask for our public comments again? No. All right, we're good to go. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Ms. Sanchez. Again, welcome back. Okay, all right, moving on to item 8, committee reports. And we're gonna go with the mobility stakeholder group with Mr. Campos.
Thank you. Under item 8A4 was discussion and possible action regarding NASBA's, regarding the findings of NASBA. And so a NASBA representative provided an update on the remaining jurisdictions that were lacking the disciplinary flag. NASBA's IT unit is working with Virginia, Alabama, and Puerto Rico, and those jurisdictions are expected to have the disciplinary flag completed by the end of the summer. The MSG did not take any action on this item, but just to maybe even back it up a second, from prior meetings, all 55, well, 54 if you exclude California, jurisdictions were determined to be in alliance with the enforcement guidelines that NASBA had put out, and so they were meeting that substantial equivalency piece. And the internet flags, which are specified in the mobility rules, were missing from 10 jurisdictions. 7 of them have rectified that since the last meeting through the work that NASBA's been doing with them. A good portion of that through the leveraging of the ALD and the CPA Verify options that are out there for them. These 3 are the ones that remain. So we're down to really 3 jurisdictions, and there will be some further. We deferred any action as a MSG unit to the next meeting to allow some time to validate what we heard has changed since the last time, and so there will be more to come there. Item 8A5 was a discussion and possible action regarding the draft 2017 Mobility Stakeholder Group final report. Staff reported that this final MSG report contains data and details that span the entire length of the MSG's activities. After today's meeting, staff will make any necessary changes to the document and draft appropriate content for the message from the chair, activities and accomplishments, and conclusion sections. And then the final report will come back at our MSG July meeting for approval. Mr. Petito stated that the CBA's work with NASBA to improve the standard of the accounting profession while maintaining its authority through the entire process should be highlighted in the final report. We had some good dialogue about incorporating that into this report that can then form the basis of a legislative report that I'll touch on in a second. Additionally, it was suggested CBA staff work with NASBA to obtain information on the national impact of the current practice privilege program. The MSG directed staff to incorporate the changes discussed today and provide a revised draft at our July meeting. So no specific action, brought forward here for the board. Item 8A6 was review a preliminary outline of a draft report to the legislature pursuant to BPC section 5096.21F. And this section requires the CBA to submit a report to the legislature by January 1st of 2018 that explains at a minimum the following. One, how the board implemented the program and whether the implementation is complete, whether the current program, in the opinion of the board, offers more, less, or equivalent protection to the public than the previous program, and 3, describes how other state boards of accountancy have addressed referrals to those boards from the CBA, including the time frame in which those referrals were addressed and the outcome of investigations conducted by those state boards. Additional subject matter was suggested to be included in the report, including data from complaints received during both the previous practice privilege program and the current one. After today's meeting, staff will complete the first draft of the report and bring it back to the MSG's July 2017 meeting for comment and review. The MSG directed staff to provide members with an interim draft before the July meeting in the interest of getting as complete a draft as possible at that particular meeting. So no action at this point, but more to come on that front. Item 8A7 was discussion regarding NASBA's activities in CPA Verify. Noted how ALD and CPA Verify have been instrumental really in getting these additional internet flags posted. There are 51 total jurisdictions that do participate in ALD and CPA Verify. 4 states, Delaware, Hawaii, Utah, and Wisconsin, are not yet participating in ALD and CPA Verify. And it is anticipated that Wisconsin will participate by the end of the year. And again, this was an informational item. Just to clarify, the 3 jurisdictions that were still pending, they all do participate in ALD and CPA Verify. They just don't put their discipline through ALD and CPA Verify quite yet, and that's what they're working on, leveraging that. These 4 do not participate, but they have other internet flag options available that satisfies the mobility piece. And then finally, item 8A8, future topics for future meeting include further review of any additional states identified by NASBA as substantially equivalent. We expect to have good progress come the July meeting on that. Review and possible approval of the MSG final report, and discussion of the CBA report to the legislature regarding the implementation of the current practice privilege program. And then staff welcome MSG input regarding any additional topics it wishes explored for the next meeting. And again, all of these for your information.
Any comments or questions from the board? I had a quick question. So on the 3 jurisdictions, do they have deadlines from their own, or from their own states in order to get to the deadline, or to get verified? Does that make sense?
No.
No, okay. So
no, I know what you're saying.
Okay. Thank you. I'm glad you
Those
understand.
states, California has and this was Joe's point during our meeting. We adopted in our state mobility in a fairly unique way that is probably unlike many other states. And so there are no sort of state-driven processes driving these other states to do this stuff. It's been a lot of the California actions, and so they're aware of the deadlines, and they've been working very actively because I think there's a mutual interest in not compromising the ability of mobility to be an option for licensees.
Do I have any other comments from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Okay, with that, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to go on to item B, Legislative Committee with Ms. Hines.
Thank you, Madam President. On item 8B2A, recommendation to maintain the California Board of Accountancy's current position. The staff recommended maintaining the current positions on the following bills: AB 703, AB 1190, SB 27, SB 247, and SB 795, which have not been amended since the CBA's March 2017 meeting. The Legislative Committee did not take an action on this item. Agenda item number 8B2B, recommendation of possible action to change the California Board of Accountancy's position on AB 1631. This item was substantially amended and the updated analysis was provided, including staff's recommendation for the CBA to discontinue its watch position. As for SB 496, it was substantially amended and also signed into law. The Legislative Committee recommends that the CBA withdraw its watch position on AB 1631 and support position on SB 496, and to discontinue following both bills.
Okay, so this comes as a fully formed motion. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
I'm trying to catch up with
Oh,
which
sorry, well,
bills
I'll let you do
you're talking
that.
about. Lengthy,
I'll let you do that, because I have a question, and I think I've already kind of talked about it with Ms. Bowers, but I think it was 496 where it was just completely, I don't want to say hijacked, but it was changed into a completely different bill. It was almost like they just took the number away and made it into something else. Okay, so I'll go ahead and do that.
Could you repeat the
Yes.
numbers of the bills you're talking about?
The first one is AB 1631. And if you look in your packet, it's actually attached to the one of the earlier.
Somebody help with which attachment are we?
Sure.
Which agenda item and which attachment?
So if you
are we
look
talking
at
about?
CBA agenda item 8B2, and the letter after that is for 1631. It is attachment number 3, I think. Yes, it's attachment number 3.
Attachment number 3 to that. Sorry.
No. Yes. I know.
Is it helpful to ask staff to come up and give an explanation, a brief explanation of what the bills entail, or would that be helpful?
Would the staff, or I mean, would the board members be interested in hearing that, getting more information? No?
Sure.
Okay. Whatever Mr. Campos wants. That's all I care
Great.
about. All right. Oh, I know, and the shields, of course.
And you were beginning to outline, you said AB 1631.
Yes, AB 1631 is the first, and then it's followed, the next one, SB 496, which we're also recommending action on, is the bill, is attachment number 4. And I see that Ms. Movasaki is at the microphone, so she can give a brief explanation of the two bills.
Certainly. So both bills were amended completely, and the word for hijack was gut and amend, so.
Sorry, yeah, I know.
SB 496 was completely changed and is already signed into law, and SB 1631 was also changed, and the reason staff recommended the positions to be withdrawn was because the bill content is irrelevant to the CBA.
Okay,
Got it.
all right.
On both bills. Correct.
Okay, so this is a fully formed motion already to go ahead and just withdraw the watch position and.
Support.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Watch
To-
and support.
Watch and support positions for both 496 and 1631.
And to discontinue following both bills.
Okay, are there any questions or comments? Any comments or questions from the public? Okay, with that, we'll call for the vote. That is the motion, I think. Yes.
Sunny Youngsun Park?
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Kathleen Wright?
Yes.
Alicia Burhow?
Yes.
Jose Campos?
Yes.
George Familet?
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines?
Yes.
Larry Kaplan?
Yes.
Soshi Leon?
Yes.
Is that everybody? Oh, okay. So, all right, okay, with that, the motion passes. Okay, Ms. Hines?
Moving on to agenda item, CBA item 8B2C. Bills being monitored by the California Board of Accountancy. So this agenda item contains a list of mostly spot bills which may have a potential impact on the CBA. Staff will monitor these bills for future amendments. There is no action needed on this item, and a list of those bills is provided in our packet of information
Okay.
for the board's reference.
Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments from the public? Okay. Please continue.
Moving on to CBA agenda item 8B3A, consideration of positions on legislation. There are a number of items that we're going to go over, so I'll just start with the listing of the bill. The first one is AB 767. The title is Master Business License Act. Staff stated that AB 767 was amended on May 3rd. This bill would create within the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, or GOBIZ, a business license center to develop and administer a computerized master business license. AB 767 would impact both individual and firm applications and create additional workload for the CBA staff to update various existing forms. According to the DCA Office of Information Services, the one-time cost to implement this bill would be over $4 million and $120,000 on an ongoing basis. The Legislative Committee recommends that the CBA take a watch position on AB 767 and direct staff to send a letter communicating the CBA's concerns regarding consumer protection, including potential costs and regulatory changes needed to implement the bill.
And this is a fully formed motion. At this point, is there any questions or comments from the board?
Yes. So we can't get Breeze done yet, and we're on, I don't know how many years of a project there, and we're gonna take on another project?
Yeah.
I mean, is this what's being recommended out of this bill?
Yes.
Yes,
But
Go
it's
implement something
statewide.
else?
yes.
But it's statewide, all the agencies would have to use this
So this is
master.
outside the, consumer DCA type of framework, so it's not just a DCA issue, it's.
Correct.
Which is why we're recommending that we communicate our concerns about the bill.
I think the communication should should also include, the fact that we've got this partially implemented system that's creating tremendous issues for a board like ours that hasn't yet implemented it, and yet we're held to wait until that thing is ready for us to jump onto it, right? I mean, I think that's gotta be a big part of this. I can see that watch turning into an oppose, pretty quickly.
What would be the process for amending the recommendation to include the comments that have been recommended here at the?
It seems like you already have enough commentary that you can add, that this can be just added on.
Yeah, I don't think the motion would restrict new comments from the board members to be included as long as they're in agreement with with a letter showing, listing their concerns.
We did have discussion about whether or not, and this is going to come up on a couple of the other bills. This was not the only bill that we saw that was piece of legislation that we saw that was problematic. We did have a discussion about whether or not to take, about the position to take, and we compared whether to take a watch position, whether to take a support if amended position, or whether or not to take a oppose, and then to detail it. After discussion, we determined that taking a watch position and sending a letter detailing our concerns was the most appropriate action to take at this time.
And I think the more concerns we put on there, especially if something could become an opposed position,
Right.
probably the better the messaging is on that.
Okay. Oh, yeah?
Just wanted to mention that we found out late yesterday, I believe it was, that this is now a 2-year bill. So, just for information.
Just an FYI. Okay. Any other comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Okay, with that, we'll call for the vote.
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
Larry Kaplan,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Yes.
George Pamela,
Yes.
Jose Campos,
Yes.
Alicia Burhow,
Yes.
Kathleen Wright,
Yes.
Mark Silverman,
Abstain.
Michael Savoy,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson,
Yes.
and Sunny Yenson Park.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 8B3B, consideration of positions on legislations AB 710, Department of Consumer Affairs Boards meetings. AB 710 would require every board within the DCA to meet once every other calendar year in rural Northern California. This bill was recently amended to strike out the word northern. Staff reached out to the author's office and was informed that additional amendments may be forthcoming. Current law requires a board within DCA to meet at least 3 times each calendar year and at least once in Northern California. The CBA meets 6 times a year in either Northern or Southern California. The Legislative Committee recommends that the CBA take a watch position on AB 710.
This is a fully formed motion from the Legislative Committee. Are there any comments or questions from the board members?
This is the worst idea ever. I mean, why would we add yet one more implication to how we carry out meetings?
Agreed, especially when we're constricted by the state in terms of travel and you know, that type of thing. So that I totally understand. I'm with you 100% on that.
Stupid. It's stupid.
It's ridiculous. I mean, just, there are already provisions for northern, southern. It doesn't say rural, city, whatever, right? It's northern, southern, to put more state rates. I mean, you name all the
Right.
logistical issues you have. Open meeting, make sure you got all this working technology. That is,
But it's
I would
Napa.
be opposed to something like this.
It's still Napa.
Yeah.
It's so what?
It's near Napa. Does
A
that
rural.
change? That's rural.
No,
Rural.
It's Napa.
It does not influence my view.
Your view of this. Are there any other comments or questions? Any comments from the public? With that, we'll call for the vote.
Jose Campos,
No.
George Pamela,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Yes.
Larry Kaplan,
Yes.
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
Sunny Yenson Park,
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Michael Savoy,
Yes.
Mark Silverman,
Yes.
Kathleen Wright,
Yes.
and Alicia Burhow.
No.
Moving on to agenda item 8B3C, AB 912, California Small Business Regulatory Fairness Act. AB 912 requires a state agency excluding the Franchise Tax Board or the State Board of Equalization to assist small businesses in complying with statutes and regulations and to establish policies to reduce civil penalties for non-compliance. The CBA defines civil penalties as both administrative penalties and administrative fines levied with citation. Under existing law, licensees who violate any provisions in the Accountancy Act may be assessed an administrative penalty of not more than $5,000 for the first violation and not more than $10,000 for each subsequent violation. AB 912 would affect businesses with less than 100 employees which have an average annual gross receipts less than $10 million over the previous 3 years. The Legislative Committee recommends that the CBA take a watch position on AB 912 and directs staff to send a letter communicating the CBA's concerns regarding consumer protection. So similar to the earlier bill, we had a fairly robust discussion about this bill, detailing what some of our concerns were about the impact that the bill would have. And staff is going to communicate that to the author of the bill, and we determined that it was most appropriate for us to take a watch position rather than to recommend either a support or oppose with additional comments.
Okay. So this is a fully formed motion from the Legislative Committee. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Okay. Any comments from the public? With that, we'll call for the vote.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Michael Savoy,
Yes.
Mark Silverman,
Yes.
Kathleen Wright,
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson,
Yes.
Sunny M. Park,
Yes.
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
Alicia Burhow,
No.
Jose Campos,
Yes.
George Familet,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines,
Yes.
and Larry Kaplan.
Yes.
Okay, with that, the motion passes.
Moving on to agenda item 8B3D, AB 1005. AB 1005 would require non-healing arts boards within the DCA to include an order of abatement and a citation, allowing a licensee to fix the violation with 30 days and within 30 days, and if the licensee successfully abates the violation within 30 days, the fee would be waived. The CBA's top 2 violations resulting in citations are failure to complete a minimum of 20 hours of continuing education in each year of the 2-year license renewal period, and failure to respond to any inquiry by the CBA within 30 days. Staff works diligently to assist licensees in complying with the law prior to issuing a citation and assessing any administrative fine. The Legislative Committee recommends that the CBA take a support if amended position on this bill, contingent upon the author amending AB 1005 to exempt the CBA or make the provisions of the bill permissive. And the rationale here is that the CBA has its goal is to protect the consumers, to protect the public, and has a very robust regulatory scheme to allow for mitigation of penalties assessed upon licensees where there have been infractions. And we believe that that system is appropriate in both assisting licensees where they have infractions and not being overly burdensome, but also maintaining our commitment to protecting the public. So with that.
All right, well, thank you. So this is a fully formed motion from the Legislative Committee. Are there any comments or questions? Mr. Campos?
What was the alternative to support, support it from, I get what you just said.
Sure.
So if such amendments are not made, would we be in opposed mode, or would?
No, there just
does-
wouldn't be a position.
The recommendation was to watch the bill, but we determined after discussion that it would be more appropriate to take a position. The author of this bill reached out to the CBA and specifically asked for us to opine on it. And so rather than take a watch position and not give an opinion on it, we decided to give our opinion and see whether or not the legislature.
We don't have to comply with it, we're okay with it? That's kind of the.
Yeah, well, I mean, the exemption, there is an exemption for the healing arts, and we don't know why the healing arts were exempted, and we did ask staff to find out. If presumably the healing arts were exempted because they have an adequate regulatory system that achieves both the goals of mitigating the burden on licensees as well as protecting the public. then we are in a similarly situated we're similarly situated, and so an exemption would not be an unreasonable request for us to include, and maybe it's an oversight on their part. If they do not exempt us, then it would be easier for our board to comply with this bill if we were put in a position where the provisions were permissive rather than mandatory. So it was within our discretion to operate according to the rules of this legislation, but it still would give us the flexibility to be able to use our regulations to impose fines and penalties on licensees.
And Ms. Salazar, you're good to go.
Yes, thank you. My apologies for interrupting. I just wanted to confirm I'd heard correctly that the motion is yes, indeed, a support.
Yes. Okay. Any other comments or questions from the board? Oh, Ms. Shields?
I just want to clarify on the legislative positions, it's sort of you figure out which tactic works best for a bill. A support, if amended, is kind of a carrot option where we'll give you support if you take our amendment. And the oppose is sort of like a stick method where it's we're going to oppose unless you fix this. So it just depends on how strongly you feel about the issue and whether you think one would be more effective than the other.
Well, and just the fact that the author has been communicative with us and asking, our opinion and what would possibly work and what wouldn't work. I think it's a good way of going with the support versus oppose.
And this is just citations. This is not administrative penalties, some of the other things that might happen. It's just citations.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the board? Any comments from the public? With that, I'll call for the vote.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Yes.
Larry Kaplan.
Yes.
Soshi Leon.
Yes.
Sunny Young Park.
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson.
Yes.
Katrina Salazar.
Yes.
Michael Savoy.
Yes.
Mark Silverman.
Yes.
Kathleen Wright.
Yes.
Alicia Burhow.
Yes.
Jose Campos.
Yes?
And George Familet.
Yes.
Moving on to agenda item 8B3E, SB 547. SB 547 is one of two CBA-approved omnibus proposals. This bill would amend Business and Professions Code sections 5063.3A4, which would require a written non-disclosure agreement during a sale or merger of a practice. In addition, the bill amends BPC Section 5096.9 to allow the CBA to initiate a Section 100 rulemaking to quickly extend or remove the inoperative dates of the CBA's practice privilege regulations. In addition, the bill amends BPC Section 5096.9 to allow the CBA to initiate a Section 100 rulemaking to quickly extend or remove the inoperative dates of the CBA's practice privilege regulations. The Legislative Committee recommends that the CBA take a support position on the provisions of SB 547 relating to the CBA.
Okay, so this is a fully formed motion from the Legislative Committee. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any other comments from the public? With that, we'll call for the vote.
Michael Savoy.
Yes.
Katrina Salazar.
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson.
Yes.
Sunny Young Park.
Yes.
Soshi Leon.
Yes.
Larry Kaplan.
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Yes.
George Familet.
Yes.
Jose Campos.
Yes.
Alicia Burhow.
Yes.
Kathleen Wright.
Yes.
And Mark Silverman.
Yes.
That passes unanimously.
Moving on to 8B3F, SB 800. It's the CBA's second omnibus proposal, which would amend BPC Section 5094D to correct minor inaccuracies in the names of two organizations to which a credential evaluation services provider must belong. The Legislative Committee recommends that the CBA take a support position on the provisions of SB 800 relating to the CBA.
Okay, this is a fully formed motion from the Legislative Committee. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments from the public? Okay, with that, we'll call for the vote.
Deirdre Robinson.
Yes.
Sunny Young Park.
Yes.
Kathleen Wright.
Yes.
Mark Silverman.
Yes.
Michael Savoy.
Yes.
Katrina Salazar.
Yes.
Soshi Leon.
Yes.
Larry Kaplan,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Yes.
George Familet,
Yes.
Jose Campos.
Yes.
And Alicia Burhow.
Yes.
Moving on to item 8B3G, SB 715 would amend BPC Section 106, which grants the governor power to remove any member of a board appointed by the governor within the DCA. Specifically, this bill would include the failure to attend board meetings as one example of continued neglect of duties required by law. The same proposal was introduced as SB 496 on February 17, 2017. The CBA took a support position on that bill at its March 2017 meeting. The Legislative Committee recommends that the CBA take a support position on SB 715.
Okay, so this is a fully formed motion from the Legislative Committee. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments from the public? With that, we'll call for the vote.
Soshi Leon. Yes. Sunny Youngsun Park.
Yes.
Deidre Robinson.
Yes.
Katrina Salazar.
Yes.
Michael Savoy.
Yes.
Mark Silverman.
Yes.
Kathleen Wright.
Yes.
Alicia Burhow.
Yes.
Jose Campos.
Yes.
George Familet.
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Yes.
And Larry Kaplan.
Yes.
Okay, unanimous?
And moving on to item 8B4, which is a discussion regarding legislative items for future meeting, Senate Bill 244, Privacy Agencies' Personal Information. SB 244 affects the permitted disclosure of public records. According to DCA legal counsel, under current law, the CBA is authorized to share personal and confidential information with agencies conducting investigations of violations within its jurisdiction, as long as the agencies agree in writing to treat the information as confidential. This bill would restrict such sharing for law enforcement or prohibit it unless required by law. The Legislative Committee recommends that the CBA direct staff to monitor SB 244 and observe whether it is approved by the Senate, and then work with President Burhow to schedule a special meeting of the CBA to consider taking a position on the bill prior to it being heard in the Assembly's policy committees. This item was brought before the board within the time period in which we are prohibited from considering new items. And so, however, there are some timeliness concerns about our board's ability to take a position on this bill. And so that's why the Legislative Committee is recommending this special authority be granted to President Burhow to allow us to have the opportunity to have input and influence over the bill.
Okay, so this is also considered a motion from the committee, correct? I just wanna make sure.
No, there's no motion.
There's no motion, so this is just a
Recommendation.
FYI. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
I think we just wanted to bring this to your attention so you'd be aware that if you do call a special meeting, you'll know what it's about and why we're having it. But you always have the authority under the Open Meeting Act as the presiding officer to call a special meeting. We'd have to make a finding at the meeting of the necessity for it, but
Okay.
you always do.
All right. Thank you very much. Well done.
Thank you, and I want to just give a special thanks to staff for their support in preparing the Legislative Committee for our meeting and in facilitating that meeting. It's very appreciated. And with that, I conclude my report.
All right, well, thank you very much. All right, moving on to item C, Committee on Professional Conduct, Mr. Famila.
Yes, the item agenda was 8A2, and the purpose of the item was to provide the board the opportunity to discuss and take action regarding regulations that are obsolete or outdated. Specifically, the CBA regulations to amend or repeal, in summary, dealt with Section 7.1C, credit status for the computerized uniform CPA examination, repeal Section 8, examination final filing dates, amend Section 70 for fees, which related to the temporary reduction of fees for a 2-year period, amend Section 75.5, application review of refusal to approve obsolete sections that no longer exist and replace sections that are relevant. and repeal sections 87.6 and 89.1. They relate to the Quality Monitoring Committee, which no longer is in existence. So the CPC recommends that the CBA approve the regulatory text of the CBA regulations 7.1, 870, 75.5, 87.6, and 89.1, and direct the staff to go through the process of the regulatory review and take all necessary steps to initiate the rulemaking process and make changes to the package and set the matter for hearing.
So this is a fully formed motion from the Committee on Professional Conduct. Is there any questions or comments from the board members? Okay. Are there any comments from the public? With that, we'll call for the vote.
Larry Kaplan,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Yes.
George Familet,
Yes.
Jose Campos.
Yes.
Alicia Burhow.
Yes.
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
Sunny Yun Park.
Yes.
Deidre Robinson,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Michael Savoy,
Yes.
Mark Silverman,
Yes.
and Kathleen Wright.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Mr. Femela, does that conclude your report?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item D, Enforcement Program Oversight Committee with Ms. Leon.
So on CBA agenda item 8D2, this is an update on our meeting discussion and input on the newly developed California Board of Accountancy Enforcement Handbook for licensure applicants. In our meeting earlier today, members reviewed the newly developed enforcement handbook. I do want to recognize Mr. Francella and the overall enforcement division for their proactiveness in putting this together. The handbook provides applicants with an understanding of what to expect regarding the CBA enforcement process and covers conviction history and reportable events, as well as enforcement referrals, denial of licensure, probation, and various miscellaneous information on bilingual services and public document policy. The members offer some great suggestions for the inclusion in the handbook, including clearly noting that enforcement documents remain on the website forever, and also to include a statement on who to call should applicants have further questions regarding the process. That completes my update.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, moving right along. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on to item 9. This is going to be the acceptance of the minutes. So the legislative committee minutes, item 9B, will be taken out of order so corrections can be made. So can I get a motion to approve the minutes, specifically agenda items 9A and 9C through H?
I move approval of the minutes as presented on 9A and 9C through 9H.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? With that, we'll call for the vote.
Sunny Yun Park,
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Michael Savoy,
Yes.
Mark Silverman,
Yes.
Kathleen Wright,
Yes.
Soshi Leon,
Yes.
Alicia Burhow,
Yes.
Jose Campos,
Yes.
Larry Kaplan,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Yes.
And George Familet.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. So, and can I get a motion to approve the minutes specifically? I went through that, sorry about that. So I would like to invite Ms. Movasaki to come to the table to explain the corrections for the legislative committee minutes for item 9B.
Thank you, Madam President. On page 4 of the LC minutes, the March LC minutes, under section E, Assembly Bill 1631, there's an error and the motion should read, it was moved by Ms. Robinson and seconded by Ms. Wright to recommend that the CBA take a watch position, not a support position on AB 1631. And on the following page, under item G, Senate Bill 496, the motion should read, it was moved by Mr. Famelot and seconded by Ms. Robinson to recommend that the CBA take a watch position on SB 496, not SB 27. And I apologize for that error.
Okay, so can I get a motion to approve item 9?
I move approval as revised.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, all right. All right, well, he's sitting next to me, so I can give it to him. Are there any comments or questions from the public? Any other comments or questions from the board? With that, we'll move to the vote.
Kathleen Wright?
Yes.
Mark Silverman?
Yes.
Michael Savoy?
Yes.
Katrina Salazar?
Yes.
Deirdre Robinson?
Yes.
Sunny Youngsun Park?
Yes.
Soshi Leon?
Yes.
Larry Kaplan?
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines?
Yes.
George Familet?
Yes.
Jose Campos?
Yes.
And Alicia Burhow.
Yes. Okay, passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to item 10, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, report on the meetings of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants attended by a California Board of Accountancy representative. Do you have a report? All right. All right, moving on to item B, the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, report on meetings of the NASBA, I'll just do it that way, attended by the California Board of Accountancy representative. Do we have a report on that? Fantastic. Moving on to item 2, discussion of staff responses to the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy focus questions regarding the California Board of Accountancy's enforcement and training programs. Ms. Reed?
The purpose of this agenda item is to provide the CBA with staff responses to the NASBA focus questions. The responses assist the NASBA regional directors with staying apprised of each state's policies, procedures, and recent activities. No action is required on this agenda item unless the CBA would like additional information provided to NASBA on the questions. And at this time, I would like to turn it back over to President Burhow and would be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments from the public? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 3, report on committee meetings by NASBA, attended by a California, oh, I did that one, sorry. Okay, there's nothing on that one, is there, for number 3?
Just the committee report.
Oh, just the committee reports on those, okay. All right. We'll go ahead and start with item A, Communications Committee. Is there a report by Mr. Kaplan?
Oh, no.
Okay, that's all you need to say. Okay, Enforcement Resources Committee meeting. Is there a report from Ms. Salazar?
There is.
Oh, fantastic.
Oh, I'm
I'm
super-
super excited.
Okay, folks, get ready. No. Thank you very much. The update is fairly brief. I did participate by conference call in the May Enforcement Resources Committee meeting, and would share with you that the committee is actually tracking 10 projects right now and of different topics. The 2 that I think are worth highlighting is that this committee continues to dovetail nicely with the work being done at NASBA to follow up on the mobility initiative, which is a California initiative, is what they call our MSG process that we are going through. So that committee level continues to monitor and ensure that NASBA is moving those issues forward, and you heard the report today. The other issue that I thought was key is the ongoing discussions regarding the Department of Labor's findings and moving enforcement actions to the state board. So this committee continues to watch that process and as NASBA works through that. So we'll continue to give you any updates. I will share that there has been some turnover at the Department of Labor, and so the committee and NASBA, the report we received was that they are working with AICBA to ensure that there is continued communication to ensure that state boards across the nation are receiving information about referrals. So again, to dovetail to our prior conversations, I was able to reiterate that our organization really does want those. We're ready to act. We simply require notification. So those are probably the 2 most prominent issues that our board is looking at today. But unless there are any questions, thank you for your time.
Any questions or comments from the board? Any public comment? Thank you very much. All right, item number C, Computer-Based Testing Administration Committee.
They have no report.
Wow, okay, that's, yeah, that sounds too technical. All right, item D, Continuing Professional Education Committee.
No,
Ms.
we
Wright?
did not meet.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're gonna move on to closing business. Are there any public comments? Okay, seeing none. Moving on to item B, are there any agenda items for future California Board of Accountancy meetings? Ms. Wright?
Thank you. This is a comment I was going to make earlier. Several meetings ago, I had asked if we could put on the agenda a discussion of the white paper published. There was one published by NASBA and another published by, excuse me, the AICPA regarding how CPAs should respond and the ethical considerations with respect to the legalization of the recreational use of marijuana. In the March book that we had, all the items in the March meeting, there was a page at the end of that book that said items scheduled for future meetings. And on that page, it indicated that this topic would be discussed at the May meeting, which is now. I don't see it on the agenda, so are we not going to discuss it? Is that the decision, or what happened?
Yep, Lisa, please.
We actually are coordinating and have sent a communication out to the representatives of the new Bureau on Cannabis Regulation, I think is their title. Their title's being changed, but so we're actually working with them so that when that discussion comes before the board, we can actually have a representative from that organization attend as well.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That's the state agency that is handling.
Does that answer?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I have gotten questions in my ethics seminar regarding this topic. In fact, it comes up in every single seminar. And I had said the board is going, I hope I wasn't overstepping my bounds, but my response when I have gotten that question is the board is going to consider this issue. That's all I said.
Okay.
Which I thought was true.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move into item 12, closed session.
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
President
I
Burhoff,
know,
may I?
I'm moving, I know, I'm fast.
I wanted to request that staff put on the ongoing agenda to track when it's appropriate to consider the peer review population as maybe it relates to outreach. It was mentioned by Chairman Gleiser again, and it was part of our discussion earlier today, that encouraging a robust peer reviewer population is and will continue to be important for our groups. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Anyone? Bueller? Okay. All right, so moving on to item 12, closed session. Pursuant to Government Code Section 11126, C3, the California Board of Accountancy will convene into closed session to deliberate on disciplinary matters, stipulated settlements, default decisions, and proposed decisions. Additionally, item B, pursuant to Government Code Section 11126E, the California Board of Accountancy will meet in closed session to receive advice from legal counsel on litigation, David Greenberg versus California Board of Accountancy, Los Angeles County Superior Court, case number BS 155045.